Estrogen is more than just for making babies. It actually is needed for making energy throughout our body for both men and women. Today, I'm going to be talking about 4 critical ways estrogen works by making energy throughout our body.
You're watching the Dr. Jake podcast.
I'm Dr. Jake. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor and integrative physician in Salt Lake City, Utah. On this channel, I share with you how you can heal your body naturally and get your energy back without any harmful drugs or surgery. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. I recently filmed a video with my co-host Teresa Marie in which we talked about how estrogen is so important for making our energy production. Stick around till the end because we're going to be talking about how this is absolutely treatable. So yeah, this is going to be a fun topic because most people think of estrogen as like fertility things or PMS type of stuff, as things like that, but it has a big role in our energy production. So I think it'll be a very interesting topic today.
Yes. Now, before we even jump into those details, I want to ask, is the role of estrogen in energy the same for both men and women, or is it only for women?
So it's not just for women, even though women are the ones that make a lot more estrogen, so it has a bigger effect there. But men can have an issue with their estrogen and lead to fatigue too. So we might dive in a little bit into that in this video.
Perfect. Okay, so we know the traditional view, is more having to do with, with our sex hormones and fertility. Can you just give us an overview for those of you who are really even not 100% familiar on how estrogen works with that? Like just a quick overview. What's the traditional, view of estrogen and how that works?
So yeah, we have estrogen, and it has a big effect on our cycles. So we make a lot of estrogen in the beginning of our cycle, and then we decrease that at the end of our cycle. And this helps with implantation of an egg or getting our uterus ready for the implantation of the egg to have a baby. If no implantation happens with that egg, it just sloughs off, and then we have the period. But then we have estrogen that does all kinds of things throughout our body. It's a hormone. It's a little communicator. So it's not just related to just making babies. It's so much related to our mood health, our metabolism, our energy production, our sexual development when we are younger, or the continual sexual development during our older years with maintaining libido or sleep and things like that.
So, as women, as men, if we are coming to a place in our life where we're feeling like, oh, I just don't have the energy that I used to, estrogen could be playing a role in this, whether or not we're, as women, we're even having a regular cycle or not.
Yes, estrogen will have a big role. Just because you have a regular cycle does not mean that your estrogen is just right. You might have way too much estrogen or too little estrogen and still be having a regular cycle. I see this all the time. Now, if you have too imbalance of your estrogen, this can cause dysregulation of your cycle, and that can be an issue in another regard. But you can't just think, oh, I have a normal cycle. That means estrogen can't be related to my energy issues, because that's definitely not the case.
Well, hopefully today, as you start digging into the specifics, for those of us who are listening and going, could this be my issue? That as you're listening today, if you start noticing, whoa, that is totally me. Whoa, that is totally what's happening to me. Definitely something to be paying attention to. Call your integrative doctor, call Dr. Jake, and get this fixed, because Dr. Jake's going to specify too that this is totally treatable, and you do not have feeling low energy. I mean, that is so impactful, I think, to everything. I mean, our energy levels, I need for me and many people that I talk to, your energy levels not only affect how much you can accomplish, but how you feel about what you're doing, your desires to achieve some of the things that you wanted to do when you were younger, that later on we kind of give up on, it's too much work. It plays such a big role in just not just our physical energy, but even our mental and emotional energy as well. So let's dig into this. One of the first things, Dr. Jake, that you talk about, and this plays a role in energy, is estrogen's role in our metabolism in the first place. Can you dig into that for us?
So many of us, when we hear the word metabolism, at least me and many of my patients, they think gaining weight or weight loss when we think of metabolism. But that's really the wrong way of doing it. When our metabolism isn't working appropriately, we're going to gain a lot of weight because we're not making the energy that we should. So what estrogen does is it goes into our cell and acts directly on our energy producers in our cell, mostly our mitochondrial function, helps it go through all its myriad of different mechanisms of action to make just a molecule of ATP. So all the body uses for energy production. So when we don't have enough estrogen, we are not going to be able to have a good metabolism. This is why it leads to when women start going through menopause, they start gaining a lot of weight, or premenopause, they start gaining a lot of weight around their hips or their belly. This is where a lot of the fat accumulation happens around that time because of that decreased metabolic function. Also, women can start gaining weight because they might not have the energy like they used to, and they're not as active as they used to. And we're going to maybe talk about a lot of the other things that can happen that could be related to that with this. But let's say you have way too much estrogen there. You're making weight. It's about a balance. You have way too much estrogen, and it bogs down your metabolism because you're overstimulating the body. And then the body says, hey, I'm overstimulating, and it stops decreasing certain mechanisms of action.
Wanted to get that clarification for those of us who are listening, so that we're not thinking, oh, well, no, that's just for high or that's just for low. If you are having some metabolism issues, it doesn't matter. It could be high, it could be low. Both of them could be possibilities. Okay, next, and I think this is one I definitely associate often with energy, and that is how estrogen affects our cortisol and our testosterone. Talk to us about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so cortisol. So we've talked about this in other episodes about how cortisol affects our energy, but we haven't related to how estrogen actually increases our cortisol function. So if we have way too much estrogen not being made, we're not going to be able to stimulate that cortisol effect. Cortisol is what goes in our cell and stimulates energy, focus, concentration, and all that throughout our body. And that's what wakes us up in the morning and helps us actually go to bed at nighttime. So if we're not making that cortisol effect, we're not going to have that focus, concentration, that big oomph that we need in the morning to make energy. And it could be all related possibly to just having too little estrogen, and we increase that estrogen function, we're able to get that cortisol inside there. Cortisol also is needed for release of sugar through our liver, so we don't get this like afternoon fatigue that can happen when our blood sugar starts decreasing, or when it's starting to get lunchtime, we might get a little tired, or there could be an imbalance of your blood sugar that happens right after you eat. This is very common type of things, and this is all related to your imbalance of blood sugars and related to the cortisol production there. So when we're not have too little estrogen, we're not going to produce the appropriate amount of cortisol at the right times during the day and get that sugar release to be able to get our cells the fuel that it needs to be able to make ATP, which is energy production throughout our body. It also helps with our release of testosterone. Testosterone is needed for our mitochondrial function. We have so many things. We have estrogen, we have cortisol, testosterone, all needed for our mitochondria to make that energy production. But we need testosterone to be able to build muscle. When I talk about muscle, okay, we think muscle as strength, but also it's our most metabolic tissue throughout our body. So if we have more muscle, we're going to have greater metabolism, which then means that we are going to have more energy. The more muscle we have on our body, the more ability our body will be able to make ATP and energy production throughout our entire body. So testosterone helps with that. It also is needed for dopamine and serotonin production, which is to keep our mood healthy and strong. Many times we feel tired because we just have lack of motivation to do things throughout the day. And we think that we don't necessarily relate that to our mood, but it's definitely a big piece of what's going on there. Also, we need serotonin to be able to make melatonin to help us sleep at night. So testosterone does all kinds of things there. It also helps decrease the amount of fat that we accumulate on our bodies. And the more fat that we accumulate, the less stamina we have, the less ability that we have to work out, and the more tired we get when we do activities. So we just don't want to do activities throughout the day.
Now, do we typically see low testosterone in people who have too much estrogen or too little estrogen, or both?
Let's say someone has a lot of fat and not a lot of muscle. That is going to actually make too much estrogen throughout your body. So you're going to convert all the testosterone, a lot of your testosterone that you're making, and that gets converted to estrogen. So this can be an issue with guys, especially that they might be a little overweight. It's very difficult for them to gain more muscle or get in more shape because all that testosterone that they are making is getting converted to estrogen, and it's not helping the body at all there. But let's say we have way too much estrogen, you are going to be producing too much testosterone possibly, and that's an issue too. It's all about a balance with our hormones. We don't want too little or too much of any of these type of hormones. Or if we have too little estrogen, we're going to make too little. So it's about a balance between how much testosterone we have in our body. Too much is going to definitely be an issue, and too little is going to be an issue also.
That makes sense. Now, I know you kind of touched on serotonin already when you were specifically talking about sleep. You were talking about, how cortisol affects our sleep. So a lot of like women, for example, who are going through menopause, they're having too much estrogen, and that also can affect their sleep. Then you kind of touched a little bit on serotonin and melatonin. Can you dig a little bit more into that? How does estrogen play a role in our serotonin? And then how does that affect our melatonin and our sleep at the same time?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this with testosterone helps with serotonin production piece. That's one piece, and estrogen makes testosterone helps there. But estrogen also helps increase serotonin in our body. So let's say we're going through menopause and we're decreasing estrogen. This is going to affect our mood. It's also going to affect our sleep. But women that aren't necessarily menopausal also might have a little too much estrogen being made, and that's going to affect their mood too. Serotonin is needing for our feelings, greater sense of well-being and feeling good, but also it's needed. It's a precursor hormone that's needed for making melatonin. So melatonin is what makes us want to go to sleep at night. So let's say you're not making enough estrogen, you're going to make too little serotonin, so you're not going to be as happy. Also, you're not going to be able to sleep as well at night, so you're not going to get a good night's sleep, and you need sleep to heal and regenerate, and then you're going to be more tired because of that too. So your mood's going to be down, and you're not going to be sleeping, so you're just not going to feel like doing things throughout the day because of that decreased serotonin production from our estrogen.
I mean, I can imagine how frustrating that might be, where you're tired throughout the day and you're thinking, okay, I'm really tired. I must need more sleep. And then you go to bed that night and you struggle with sleep.
Yeah.
And the vicious cycle that this must create, especially knowing how restorative sleep is, like to restore our body's energy levels, but it helps out, flushing toxins from our brain. It helps us reset emotionally, mentally, and so forth. So I could see how this could really build up and have somebody who used to be full of energy and life not feel like themselves anymore, going, what's wrong with me? And this is totally something that you do not have to live with. And guess what? You don't need antidepressants for it. It's not that type of an issue. This is a energy issue that affects so many things. Hormones are so incredibly powerful. And I know that we're still on the cusp of what we even know about. So much more, right? That we need and are working on learning. Okay, so this last one is how it affects our pancreas and insulin. And of course, that plays a role in our energy as well. Dr. Jake, please talk to us about that.
Yes. So what estrogen does, it has a special effect on our beta cells of our pancreas. The beta cells are what releases insulin from our pancreas. Our pancreas has all kinds of cells on it, does all kinds of different things. So we're just going to talk about the beta cell on the pancreas, and this helps increase insulin. So let's talk about like too little estrogen or too much estrogen and how this affects our blood sugar. So let's say someone is making way too much estrogen. This is then going to lead to the beta cells producing way too much insulin. And this could lead to women maybe getting hypoglycemic. This is also related to cortisol issues, where we could dive into that more in a later episode. But this can lead to hypoglycemia because you're producing way too much insulin, drawing the sugar out of your bloodstream into your cells, which then is going to drop your blood sugar. And then you're going to feel like, oh man, I don't really have the energy. You get lightheaded, you get tizzy, you get really fatigued. So that's one piece of like making way too much estrogen. Over time, when you're producing all that insulin all the time, that will lead to decreased sensitization of your cells to insulin, and that's type 2 diabetes. So one big cause of possibility of type 2 diabetes is that you don't know you have way too much estrogen being produced, leading to way too much insulin being produced, leading to your cells becoming desensitized to the insulin, and then you're not able to get that sugar inside your cells how you're supposed to. So let's talk about, let's say you're making too little estrogen when you're menopausal. That means you're not going to produce enough insulin, so you're not getting the sugar out of your cells, out of your bloodstream into your cells effectively. So that's going to make you have way too much blood sugar outside your body, and that's going to lead to more inflammation throughout your body, and that leads to bogging down of your metabolism. It also leads to damage to many of your organs that make energy. Like your circulation is not going to be as good. Your brain's not going to be able to have the energy that it needs. It's going to affect your adrenal glands and your ovaries and all kinds of things like that because of that chronic inflammatory response that's happening throughout the body. So you need to get your estrogen balanced out and really get it checked, because sometimes you might not notice that you have these estrogen issues, but there's so many things that can be related to your health when you have too much or too little estrogen produced. And just one little piece and we've talked about all these different things, but just the blood sugar piece alone can be a big piece of your low energy.
What I find fascinating about this is, especially for women, as a woman, and I see, my friends and my family members, as they start going through menopause, all sorts of illnesses and conditions start to arise.
Yeah.
We see an increase in heart issues. We see an increase in diabetes. We see an increase in breast cancer. All of these, the risks start to go up significantly. And I think from listening to you today, I mean, even just the role of this in our energy levels, we can see like how powerful our hormones are. I think also like recognizing that we have the beauty and benefit of science and understanding this now, that we don't have to be victims of age anymore. You don't have to be like, well, I'm going through menopause, this is just how it is, and then just give in to this miserable experience in your later years where you're just tired and you don't feel like yourself and you're grumpy. Like, you can actually experience your later years of life full of vitality and health. You don't have to be the one to have to get breast cancer or diabetes or heart issues. You can be healthy and full of life and full of joy, even as a grandparent or whatever else you want to be doing in those last years. So I really want to encourage our audience to not give into that as well. And there's so many different ways that this can be treated. Dr. Jake, I know that that's a whole other episode to really dig into all the specifics, but can you give an overview of just how is too low of estrogen or too highly treated? Like, what's the general protocols for those?
Yeah, so it's going to be different, obviously, if you have too much estrogen or too little. So let's say you have too much estrogen. We do a blood test. We see it's way too high compared to your progesterone. Many times what women have is they have too much estrogen compared to the progesterone level. And the big piece of what we're going to do is work on increasing that progesterone level. And over time doing that, that will decrease the estrogen over time. I also like to give like this broccoli seed extract or DIM or indole carbinol. This can really help decrease that estrogen, that mal effect from the estrogen throughout the body. It has an effect of making the good estrogens in your liver and taking away some of the bad estrogens that lead to all the side effects of having too much estrogen throughout your body. So when you have too little estrogen, in the beginning phases, we can use herbs like black cohosh and things like that to help increase the estrogen production. But in my experience, if it keeps on getting worse and worse and worse, those herbs can help with the symptoms, but it's not necessarily going to increase the estrogen. So you're not going to have the great benefits that come from the estrogen effect, like increasing your bone mass or decreasing your bone mass from getting worse, or increasing your serotonin levels or helping with the sleep levels or all that. Many times we have to do like a bioidentical estrogen to really get the great effects for women that are postmenopausal. Some women that are, let's say when they're not postmenopausal, they're actually still having periods and things and their estrogen's too low. Many times we could use herbs for that, but sometimes we need to do bioidentical hormones for that also. Thanks for watching today. If you want to get more videos on how to increase your energy, click the videos to the right, and I'll see you there.